When we got near the underpass, we got scrambled. Everything got scrambled. Everything started acting weird. We believe it's because these crafts with this technology can alter time, okay? Just like Bob Lazar and Tom DeLonge say, and other people have been near these crafts and know something about them. Anyways, so I'm taking the sunglasses off, and we're gonna get real, and we're gonna do our best to try to tell our story, okay? And what I want to do is I want to start with a clip from American physicist Michio Kaku. And he's a theoretical physicist, and he studied the Pentagon data, and this is what he had to say during a Joe Rogan interview.
We now have frame by frame an analysis of these objects. These objects travel between Mach 5 and Mach 20. That's 20 times the speed of sound. These objects can zigzag, and we can measure the g-force inside this object. The g-forces are several hundred times the force of gravity. In other words, any living person's bones would be crushed by these objects.
Philomena and I felt no effects of g-force during our ride in the flying saucer. In fact, just the opposite. A very smooth ride, as reported earlier, like sliding down a crack into another dimension is the best way we could describe it. Now, if the craft was making right angle turns or zigzagging, we couldn't feel any effects of that. I've got now 2 clips of Bob Lazar, one from 1989 and one from just recently, where he describes possible reasons why we had such a smooth ride inside the craft.
Craft generates its own gravitational field. Being inside that field doesn't shield you, but essentially you're in, and this is a terrible way to say it, almost in a different realm, because you're now influenced only by that gravitational field. For instance, people wonder how a craft like this can make a turn at such high speed, a 90-degree turn, when they would imagine people slamming up against the wall or something to that effect. Well, that really wouldn't happen. Inertia would have no effect. You're in a distortion, and don't forget that gravity distorts time and space, so really nothing is going to influence you while you're in there.
What Commander Fravor saw as he was in the F-18 approaching it, he said he described it as a ping pong ball in a cup and shaking it back and forth. It was moving that fast. Now, obviously, if there's anything inside there, it's going to be battered to hell. But either there's a gravitational envelope in there which negates any inertia effects, or you are seeing through a gravity distortion field, and the craft may not actually be moving like that. It may just look like it. So it may be making much more gentle moves.
Philomena and I were in what Bob refers to as a sport model, which is a 50-foot saucer, approximately 15 feet tall with 2 levels. In these next clips, Bob talks about the different craft that he saw while working at S4 in Area 51. As well, he describes how these crafts operate.
Their shapes vary. I give everything nicknames there. The one I worked on was kind of sleek looking, and I gave it the name the sport model. There was one that looked like a jello mold. There was one that looked like a top hat. There was a disc that was turned up on its side, and it had a large projectile hole with the metal bent outwards on it. I had to hang upside down in there to see the lower level, essentially. And there were 3 large gravity amplifiers. These devices looked like about a 2-foot diameter, 4-foot long piece of pipe hanging by a smaller piece of pipe from the level above, and they can be independently positioned. And that's what emits the gravitational waves that propel the craft. The second level was the only other level that I was on. It was the main level that contained the reactor where the seating was. It would be extremely inconvenient for a human pilot. Humans really can't even function in there because of the ceiling clearance. The seats were so tiny. It was obviously made for a creature much smaller than a human. In the air, we envision thrust or some force coming out the back of it to push it forward. The crafts work completely opposite of that. What they do is once they're hovering in the air, they'll swing the 2 remaining gravity generators up in front of them and create a distortion, essentially a downhill, and the craft rolls downhill for infinity. It's always chasing a little distortion. That's why they look goofy when they fly around at low speed.
Now we know how they can distort time. Now let's go back to Michio, who's going to tell us more of what these crafts are capable of, based on the information that he got from the Pentagon.
These objects can drop 70,000 feet in a few seconds. Think about that. It can drop a tremendous distance in just a few seconds, and they also move without creating an exhaust. These are things that we can now document frame by frame looking at these videotapes. We're talking about objects that defy the known laws of aerodynamics with a technology beyond what we have today. Whose are these things if they're not the Chinese, the Russians, or the United States? These objects create no sonic boom. When you exceed the sound barrier, you create a gigantic boom that is then shatters windows and can be heard miles around. These objects can effortlessly break the sound barrier and not create a sonic boom. So either they're an optical illusion of some sort, or they have a set of laws of physics beyond what we can muster. Who has this capability? And the answer is, we don't know.
It's gray aliens. It's grays. That's who's flying these crafts, okay? That's what I saw on the screen. That's what I've got a picture of. It's grays. Philomena and I encountered grays. Here's what Bob has to say about some photographs he saw while working at S4.
One or two autopsy photographs I saw dealt with just a small photograph, a bust shot essentially, just head, shoulders, and chest of an alien. Chest was cut open in a T fashion and one single organ was removed. From that photograph, it looked like what you see in UFO lore as the typical gray. I would imagine it was 3.5 or 4 feet tall.
That description sure sounds like our guys. Here's our photo again. Now, after the first abduction, Philomena and I wanted to know what happened. We were looking for some kind of answer, some similar experience from someone else. So we started looking at UFO and abduction videos online. The first one that made any sense to us was by Boyd Bushman. It's referred to as his deathbed confession because there's only this video where he talks about aliens. But Boyd was a senior scientist at Lockheed Martin who claimed to have access to Area 51 and these vehicles. As you can see by this document I got off the internet, he did have top secret clearance. Another thing is he had dozens of patents with Lockheed Martin. A simple search online will bring those up for you. But here's some examples. In the video, Boyd tells the story from the pilot who shot down the Roswell craft. As far as I've been able to find, this is the only video where he talks about UFOs. However, the original video was taken off of YouTube. I found this copy. The audio's not too good, but here goes.
A pilot who was a test pilot, a Navy test pilot for the United States government. And it was 1947. The radar group had found a blip out over New Mexico, and he got the fastest airplane that existed then, and he found the item, and he immediately communicated back, "Do I have authority to shoot it down?" He says, "Because I am flying the fastest thing that the United States can make, and he's beginning to leave me. And if he's leaving me, he's an enemy." He granted him authority. He pulled in. He shot him down. He came down. He flew past and saw that there was a road on the one side of the fence area. Down and landed his airplane, and then he cut across the fence. The door was open. One of them was out walking around. So he went over, and rather strangely enough, when he ducked down, because they were only 5 feet high, he saw that he could see through the walls. He stepped in, the floor was spongy. He looked at the three that were there, and they were dead. He knew they were. He'd killed them. But he also knew that the military would come, so he went over, got in his airplane, and took off. Therefore, he was never briefed out at all what his name was. I know that I won't reveal it.
Now, what struck me the most was the pilot said the floor was spongy and he could see through the walls. And I was wondering for a long time, how can I see through the walls of the spaceship while we're flying through space? Well, that's why it really freaked me out. Our first abduction happened under an overpass on Wisconsin I-41. Shortly after 12 a.m., the morning of April 16th, 2012. It was the Highway 144 exit, which leads into West Bend, Wisconsin. This is also the exit for the southern tip of the Kettle Moraine State Forest, a Wisconsin hotspot for UFO sightings. We were in the right lane, traveling northbound, when we blacked out as we entered the underpass. Multiple craft were used to freeze time, take us off planet, and bring us safely back. Just a few miles from downtown West Bend, Wisconsin. This is the place where they froze time.
So now we know the U.S. military has seen these things, well, pretty much every single day. And not just the U.S. military. Since everyone in America now has a video device in their pocket, we have evidence coming in constantly, and it does seem to be accelerating. There seems to be a lot more sightings in the last year. Maybe we're imagining it, but it seems that way. The latest series comes from multiple witnesses in rural Wisconsin. Just the other night, the night of December 1st, several motorists and residents took video of what appeared to be UFOs, in some cases multiple UFOs, a cluster of 5 in a couple of cases, flying right above them. These objects were reported in West Bend, Wisconsin, Fredonia, Wisconsin, also in Howard, Wisconsin, more than 100 miles away from the first two places.
Multiple videos showing up to 5 separate UFOs in the sky at a time, filmed over West Bend, Wisconsin. It was his first abduction where they took Philomena and I off planet. That's when they hooked me to the machine, Philomena as witness. That's where they programmed me and where they broadcasted the event of me being programmed. Our second abduction happened at our home the morning of June 16th, 2015, between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Our mailing address is Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, but we actually live in the town of Chichita, which is just on the northeast edge of Fond du Lac and on the shores of Lake Winnebago, about 35 miles north of our first abduction site. We live right on the water. We have a 75-foot pier which has a platform on the end. They landed the craft in the shallow water right at the end of our pier. I doctored up this Google map to show you approximately how that craft would look, a 50-foot diameter saucer parked there at the end of our pier. I made this ice video so you could see where the edge of that craft would be in correlation to our shoreline. The water depth at the end of our pier is so shallow that on a strong south wind day, it pushes north, exposing the sandy lake bottom, making a perfect parking space to land a saucer. Philomena was asleep in the den and I was working on the computer. I had to go to the bathroom, so I got up, and when I did, I checked the time on the computer. It was shortly after 2 a.m. I went into the bathroom and sat down on the stool, and less than like a minute went by, and all of a sudden I was naked on the throne. I got up and I felt really weird. I went back to the computer and I checked, and it was slightly after 4 a.m. 2 hours had passed. Memories started coming back into my mind of what happened during those 2 hours, being on the craft, being at the end of the pier, being with the aliens. And I went into our living room and I laid down on the couch for a minute because I had to just collect myself. It was at that time Philomena got up. She came in and woke me up and said, I burned my finger on the reactor in the flying saucer. I knew exactly what she was talking about because I was remembering it. And she said they laughed at her, which I remembered too. They thought it was funny. And anyways, it was a really bad moment. We believe there was a 2-hour time gap from the time they picked us up and dropped us off, because only one craft was used during our second abduction. Here's what Bob Lazar had to say about the reactor in 2 different interviews.
One of the reactors out of the crafts, which was an antimatter reactor, I was given a demonstration on how it worked, things that it did, and the physics of it. Barry showed me the reactor in operation. Here it is on the bench. And he said, try and touch the sphere on top. And you couldn't, your hand was pushed away. Just like, 2 light poles of a magnet. That's really shocking because nothing does that. That's an operating, powerful force field.
This is the same type of reactor that we saw in the craft on the second abduction, except the reactor cover dome was off and the reactor cap was exposed. Philomena reached out her hand to touch the cap, and a kind of a light beam jumped out and burned her finger. We were pretty dazed and confused after the event. We went to bed. The next morning when we woke up, we realized we should have took some pictures of Philomena's finger, which was pretty much healed. We did take some pictures, but I can't find it. I did find some pictures of the cat I took with the Canon camera, which I sent you earlier. They didn't turn out that well. However, I was going through my cell phone this last weekend, and I found some pictures I took on my iPhone. I took 2 pictures of sparkles with my iPhone. They turned out much better than the photos I took with my Canon camera, which I sent you earlier. When zoomed in, you can see surgeon-like incisions in her scalp where they probed her. These photos were taken about 6 to 8 hours after she was probed. Philomena and I remember the marks being much more intricate when we woke up right after the abduction, and they continued to heal very quickly. Unfortunately, Sparkles developed a very large tumor near her heart a few years after the event, which restricted her breathing and her ability to eat, and we had to put her to sleep. We really don't know if the alien probe caused the tumor, but we suspect it did. On our 3rd visit from the aliens, they landed on the ice about 150 feet from our house. It was on Friday, December 21st, between the hours of 9 and 10 p.m. This segment right here is one of the hardest ones to do, okay? I was sitting in my music room, which overlooks the lake, and there was a flash of light out the window. And there's a glass partition between that room and the living room. And I saw probes go through the house. They were circular probes. And they went through like this. And they had like camera eyes in them. And there were about 2 dozen. About a third went up the stairs into the upper part of the house, and the others kind of disintegrated like they were holograms, or they buried themselves into the house. Now, after the first abduction, Philomena and I talked it out. Do you think they're going to come back? They think they're going to come back? No, this was a one-time deal. They're not coming back. That's what we kind of thought. But after the second time, we were like, they're coming back. At least for me, I knew they were coming back. So I wanted to be prepared. And one of the things I needed was some kind of proof. So I thought, well, I'll keep it real simple and I'll just train myself that if they come back, I can get this out before they take over my mind or something. So I asked them for a photo, and I got one. The communication is with telepathy, thinking in your brain. It's kind of in the back of your mind. You can see what they're seeing, and hear what they're thinking. Unfortunately, they speak in a language I don't understand, so I only get what they want me to understand. The next thing I did is I have this really bright, it's a diver's light, okay? And I went and grabbed this, and I went up onto our second floor balcony, and I went over the corner of the roof where I knew the craft had landed, and I aimed this right at the spot, like right at the spot. And this is what I saw. I was dead on. I mean, right on the spot. These are photos I took the day after, first thing in the morning. You can see the center ring where the main amplifier is positioned. The next ring you see is from the bottom of the craft and matches up with the proportion on Lazar's drawing. The third ring is just melted snow from underneath the sides of the craft. When it landed and it came back, it melted all the snow around it. But that part of the craft was 7.5 feet up in the air, so it wouldn't leave a ring on the ice, but the heat from it melted and made that. I've got some photos of me standing around in the ice in the same spot so that you can see that that's about a 50-foot ring there. I've also got some photos here showing a bunch of trucks parked in about the same spot, so you know that that area of ice definitely can support a flying saucer. Our neighbors weren't home at the time. It happened right in front of their house, kitty corner to ours, so it was completely hidden from view from the street. Now to your neighbor guy who said, why Philomena and I, why not the physics department of MIT? First off, Philomena and I are two pretty smart cookies who are pretty well informed. The other thing is, Philomena didn't want me to bring this up. She didn't want me to give any publicity to that creepy guy. So I'm not going to mention any names, but MIT's physics department has clearly been compromised, okay? As you can see by these articles, as well as some other people, and who knows all else. So one thing for sure, me and Philomena are clean. Since the Pentagon release, there's been a lot of online articles about UFOs and UAPs. I like to go through the comments and see what the people are thinking, what they believe, and what they question. So I thought to close out, I would go through, I've gone through a couple thousand of these comments in the last few weeks, and I want to go through some common theme ones and give you some response. This is what the folks are saying. This first one is from AV8R. Of all the gin joints in all the towns, in all the worlds, in all the universe, why fly into ours? There's definitely a vested interest here, but also something to consider is if you owned a saucer, you need a destination to go buzz. And why not the Earth? It's got to be a lot of fun. This one is from Adam, who basically says, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Well, Philomena and I have, and it was unbelievable watching stars and planets going by. Adam, I hope you get a chance to do it someday. I really do. The next one is from Tracy, who comments, why are all UFO pics blurry? In this day and age and time, cameras nowadays are excellent. That's a good question, but unfortunately, even the photos and videos taken by our military aviators are blurry, and they supposedly have the best equipment. One reason is maybe because, as Lazar says, you're seen through a distortion, a force field of sorts around the craft that's hard to photograph. This next comment is from Oscar. He says, any foreign adversary with that technology would have already declared themselves the rulers of the world. Isn't that for sure? This one is from TM. It is alien, and the government is afraid to tell us. They're afraid of losing power. Think about it. If as a society, we all communicated telepathically, there would be no lies, no deception, and thus probably a big power shift, right? Gregory says, they hide this material because they want to weaponize this tech and do not want other countries to know what we have. Well, that's probably correct. Mike comments, there is evidence of something. if it's not aliens, then we should be really worried about who on earth has this technology. And that's another for sure. Bruce comments, if they meant harm, we would all be history. Maybe not, because they'd have to destroy our planet, and that might have consequences for them also. And finally, ULB says, they would never tell us if they were alien tech, since it would destroy our energy sector and our religion. There'd definitely be changes to the energy sector, that's for sure. But they would be for the good of the planet. As far as religion, the belief in God, both Philomena and I, after being around aliens, the concept of God makes even more sense to us. And we are closer to our religion because of our experiences. I don't know what else I can tell you to convince you that this is a film that needs to get done. And we really need your help. So please help us get this film done, okay? If you got any questions, call me, man. I'll talk to you soon.
So I just got off the phone with my mom, who happens to be a psychologist. And I've been telling her all about the aliens and the abduction and, you know, everything. Her reaction was interesting. She thinks that there's a possibility that they could be suffering from schizophrenia, or at least AV, possibly. So I'm going to Skype them and ask them, just point blank. It's going to rile them up probably, but it could be fun. If you had ever been diagnosed with schizophrenia.
No.
Okay. One of the classic symptoms of schizophrenia is the idea that you think that there's something implanted in you, and the need to get it out is like a classic symptom.
But there's 100 million suns just in our galaxy. Do you have any idea how many galaxies there are?
Oh no, 1 billion.
100 billion.
How do you know this information? What do you?
Because I have 2 kids and we talk at night and we think about these kinds of weird things. There's 100 billion
Gotcha.
galaxies.
All right.
With 100 million stars in each galaxy. And I don't know how many total that would be, but I think it's an almost incomprehensible number of stars. There are more galaxies than grains of sand on the Earth.
Where did you? That's ridiculous.
I think that's what it is. If you don't believe that there's life somewhere else, that's what you have to believe. That with all those numbers, there's nothing else. There's got to be life somewhere. And if you believe there's life somewhere else, how do we know what the heck it's like? I mean, can you imagine what it was like roaming the Earth when there were dinosaurs? Do you believe there were dinosaurs? If I turned around and there was a T-Rex there, you'd think I was crazy.
Who am I to say that planet Earth is the only location of a life form that is civilized?
Okay, so follow me for a second. Let's just imagine that AV and Philly are actually telling the truth. They really did get abducted. The story that they're telling, it actually happened. It's the truth. Then what happens? Do we run to Walmart and get guns? Do we go back to the pandemic days and stockpile toilet paper and food? What do we do then? Do we freak out? Are we running through the streets, looking up in the sky, waiting for the aliens to come down? What happens? How do we react? What does it do to our psychology, to our day-to-day living? If the FBI, CIA, and the other governments from around the world, they all decide to tell us that what we had suspected the whole time, it's the truth, it's reality, then what? Maybe there is mass hysteria and craziness in the streets. It's certainly time, ladies and gentlemen, to think about the possibility that there are indeed alien life form out there, that they're visiting us, that they've been watching us. UFOs, UAPs, these things are real. They're really happening. You can't argue with that. We're seeing video evidence. There are things in the skies that we can't explain. These are likely not military crafts. So where are they coming from? Who's operating them? We need the answers. Listen, I thought they were nut jobs to begin with, but who's the nut job now? Me? For not believing them? Maybe.
Stigma is dissolving. It's fading because of fact. We now have data, radar, visual.
Generally speaking, when somebody talks about being abducted, I tend to think they're completely wacko. Maybe they're less wacko than we think.
What if this whole thing is real? Maybe they're not crazy. Maybe I'm crazy for not believing them. What if they are carrying something inside of them? What if we need to get that out of it? Like my brother said, I'm the storyteller. Right, so I've told you the story. You guys can decide what you want to do with it. I've watched hours and hours of Tom DeLonge, Bob Lazar. Everything they're saying jives with what AV and Philly are talking about. So either they've just memorized all those videos, or what they're talking about is real. Maybe I'm the alien. I feel so bad for winding AV and Philly up, but I feel like I just had to dig and keep digging on them, see if I can get them to turn against each other. They wouldn't break. They wouldn't break. They wouldn't break. What if the information gets in the wrong hands? What if the president found out? It could affect the world. Maybe they pick me for a reason. Maybe they're the ones that need to bring it to the government because the government needs to know. Maybe I'm the alien.
So the UFO presence on planet Earth is as real as the nose on your face.